Okay, I'll start breaking this video down. Okay, so we'll watch the first part. The intro had nothing, and I'll tell you why he's wrong.
Sort
Okay.
of one of the tips I think I give to a lot of people as well is that you need to play to your strengths. So in this situation, for me, what I found is that I need to play in the positions that I'm comfortable in. I need to use the guns I'm comfortable in, and to play the play styles that I'm comfortable in. So one of the really important things to me, especially playing at the higher ranks against very good players, is to make sure that I was playing in the right position. So sometimes certain people would ask me to do things, and maybe I would just sort of play with them the way they needed me to, but I wasn't used to that. So I sort of started going back more to playing what works for me, and that I'm just more comfortable that way. You know what I mean? So for example, on Bind, I like playing U-Haul. I had people pulling me off U-Haul constantly to do other things. That didn't really work for me. And the second I went back to playing what I was comfortable in, playing what I felt strong at, I started doing much better. And I think that that's something that a lot of people need to just understand, is that if people are telling you to do these crazy things that you know you're not strong at, don't do them. Just continue to play, your game to the best of your ability. Now, sort of in sort of conjunction with the last thing I just said.
Alright, see it.
Peace.
Okay, the first thing that he says here that I have an issue with is not listening to your teammates. He essentially is saying, if you don't think your teammates are telling you to do something good, just go back to what you normally do. His example was also really bad because playing U-Haul on Bind is already a bad spot to be in most of the time. It's not a place that you should be playing every single round. But taking his example out of the equation and just saying it in a general statement, you shouldn't be in one spot every single round. If you're only good at one spot on CT side, you really need to work on your game as a whole. I mean, you can't just be playing one singular spot and expecting to rank up to Immortal. I mean, having good aim is going to get you most of the way there, but doing stuff like he's saying crazy plays, like they're probably saying like, let's push bathroom, let's push mid, let's go for a trouble push here, let's push through teleporter. Like, those are all things that are really, really easy to do that you can catch people off guard with. He's playing Brimstone. The kid asked him to do a one-way smoke somewhere. Like, you should not be playing one singular spot every round, and if your teammates are asking you to do stuff and you're constantly saying, no, I just want to play this one spot, you're creating a rift between yourself and your teammates, and the people that get set off more easily are going to start to become really toxic. It's going to start to make the game go really poorly, especially if you're not listening to people that are better than you. You're just not going to have a good time. I mean, I think the best way to start solo queuing to a high rank like Immortal or Radiant is simply listening to your teammates, playing the characters they need you to play. Now, if we're getting to play agents you're good at, I imagine I'm gonna have something to say about this, but let's just keep watching.
Is that you should be playing agents that you're comfortable with. This is a big one, particularly for newer players, but just kind of everyone in general. At higher ranks, you'd be surprised how often people are willing to give up the agent that they feel very comfortable on in favor of going someone like Sage. They play Sage and they really don't do anything. I mean, they are bad at Sage, particularly for our rank. And what ends up happening is they just sort of rely on, using their ultimate at the right time. In most cases, they never use their ultimate. And then it's just all aim at that point. In those situations, I think we can all agree we'd rather those players, or if it's us, we'd rather just be playing on the agent we're comfortable on. And I think that's a big thing people have to remember, is that you should never be too strict to the meta. It actually ends up hurting you in a lot of these situations. So for me, I pretty much only played Brim. I feel pretty good on the stage, so I played her here and there. I think maybe two or three of my games. But for the most part, I just played Brim because that's what works for me. That's what I'm comfortable on.
Okay, now this isn't too bad. This point is actually somewhat valid, but I'll say somewhat because there's a difference to it. I want to preface it by saying, if you're in an Immortal game and you don't know how to play 4 to 5 to 6 agents, you should not be at that rank. You will not get far playing a game with characters that you cannot play at least half of the agent pool. If you can only play support characters, that's one thing. If you can only play, like, I don't know, Sage, Cypher, Sova, Brim, maybe, as like support-ish characters, that's one thing. If you can only play duelists, that's one thing. But if you can only play one character, maybe two, you're gonna have a bad time because you're gonna come into situations where people are gonna lock your character. You can either take a dodge, you can take a ban, or you're gonna have to play a character that you've never played before. And when you get to a high level and you haven't played a character, you're instantly gonna get shit for saying, "Oh, I've never played this character before." And learning the meta is a good thing. You can't just say like, "Oh, just play that character you're fine with." Like, you don't have to play meta. Like, more often than not. I'm not saying meta is necessary in every single game, because it's definitely not. That's definitely not true. Playing the meta is more than likely going to get you more wins. If you take 10 games with the same people, or if you take 20 games with the same people, 10 games they play meta, 10 games they just play what they want to play. The 10 games they play meta, they're gonna do better. Because you're playing the most ideal characters. Maybe not overpowered is the word, but you're playing the most ideal characters for the game. So playing the meta is always going to be more beneficial for you. If you're only playing Brimstone and Sage, you're gonna have a bad time. That being said, if there is gonna be one character that you're gonna one-trick, I think more people would rather you one-trick a Sage or a Cypher or a Brim simply because one-tricking like Jet or something is not gonna be ideal for most team comps. But in general, I think the best rule of thumb is learn to play all the characters. If you're one of those people that can play 4, 5, 6, 7 characters, you're gonna be a lot better off than the people that can only play 1 or 2, because you're gonna get into a game and your team's gonna need a character, and you're gonna be like, okay, I can just play anything. I can play 6 different characters. Like you're always gonna be better as a jack of all trades than just a solo one trick. There's a reason that one tricks in League
Now,
only get so far.
My third tip or talking point here is about the economy. And that's to not force buy too often. Don't continuously force. And sort of on that note, the Shorty is one of the guns I was really undervaluing. I got some insane value out of it in a lot of my games. There were times where I had no right getting a kill, but because of the way I was playing and how aggressive I was playing, using my smokes on Brim, on save rounds, I was able to get kills with shorties that I should have never have been able to, which sometimes turned the tide in those rounds and actually allowed us to win save rounds. This still happens in Immortal, by the way. So don't give up.
I also just want to say it's funny that he's posting this gameplay clip because he's getting carried by 2 really good players, Ziff and Justin Over.
Save rounds, on eco rounds, whatever you want to call them. Make sure you're still trying to actually win those rounds, even with your crappy pistols. It's totally doable. You hurt the enemy economy, and you get a chance at getting some guns out of it. A lot can be gained on those eco rounds, so don't just throw them away, and don't constantly force up and spend all your money when your team isn't. It's really important that you work with your team. And if one person is force buying, everyone should force buy. So don't be the guy that forces every round. Now, number 4 here.
I was almost going to say I have no comment on that section until he said the last thing. If one of your teammates is forcing, do not force with them. Just because they make a bad decision does not mean the 5 of you have to. If one person forces, the 4 of you can still buy next round. Let them force. Let them make the bad decision. Maybe they'll get a kill or 2. Maybe it'll be okay. But just because your teammate forces does not mean everybody has to. Communication is his next point, which is probably going to be my next point, which communication is key. Like you need communication, and especially around buys. He's right on the Shorty point. The Shorty is really good, but at the same time, I think just buying a Ghost is a lot better in most situations. There's a lot of situations where you have a Shorty, and if you have to rotate, you pretty much cannot guarantee a kill. So buying 5 Shorties will never work. But buying 5 Ghosts is a really easy way to get around. I mean, it's 2 bullets, 1 headshot, 1 body shot, and they're dead. The Ghost is really, really, really strong, even against armored opponents. And if you're sitting in a corner, it basically does the same thing as a Shorty, except you just have to aim. But yeah, forcing is definitely something that I've noticed that people do a lot.
Is to communicate a lot. This really is where I sort of found my stride, I think, is that if I wasn't leading the team in terms of calling strats, I was making really good call outs. And that's just something a lot of people at the higher ranks end up doing, but you can start doing that at lower ranks and help your team just the same amount. I pretty much called everything I could. And the reason I did that is because it's so
Don't do that. Don't call everything.
important that your team is all on the same page. I mean, I literally made a video about callouts because that's how important this stuff is.
I'm curious what he means. I'm probably saying this too early, but if he means call like absolutely everything, you are gonna have the worst comms ever. It's gonna turn into Fortnite comms where people are just screaming, calling things multiple times. The best way to communicate, clear, concise things. Call out people you see, call out utility you see, and call it once. You don't have to call it 3 times. Call it 1 time, call out the things quickly, and don't comm unnecessary things.
Is. And it's just like, I don't understand why people would want to be silent in ranked. I know there's those fringe cases where, there's toxicity for the way you sound and things like that, but do your best to try to call out, it's so important that everyone is on the same page in these games, and sometimes you're the only person that can hear something, or you're the only person that knows something just happened. So you have to make the call to help your team. Another thing that really worked for me here though with communication is that I sort of assumed the strategist role. I became sort of like the in-game leader in some of my games. I made calls, I made strats, some didn't work, some worked really well. But either way, I was forcing the team to play together, and that's a big part of how to succeed when you play ranked.
I somewhat agree with this, but at the same time, you don't need to IGL in your ranked games. You just don't. I mean, there are people that the IGL role is usually reserved for someone that. We'll just leave it at that, okay? You don't need to IGL in your ranked games. It's not necessary.
My 5th tip is to stay positive. And this sort of comes into like a mindset sort of.
This is true. I'm not going to say anything about this because it's really long, and it's true. Staying positive is going to win you games. That's 100% true. The more positive you are, you're going to win. I mean, I've came back down from 10-1 games. I've came back down from, I don't know, 10-1 is like the one that I remember specifically the most, so that's the one I reference all the time. But this point's completely true. I'm not going to say anything about it because it's very, very true. Staying positive is always going to be better than being toxic, being negative. The people that are toxic always end up losing more. Calling your teammates bad, especially like in text chat to the other team, you're always going to end up losing, more often than not. Obviously, there are times that toxicity doesn't matter. People get fueled by it or whatever, play better, but as a general rule of thumb, the more positive people are always going to win.
6 is to constantly check for enemy ultimates as well as the economy before the round starts. This was big for me, especially as a Brim player. Our ultimate is really, really damaging to people who find themselves stuck in certain positions, whether in a cubby, or in my case, I play U-Haul a lot. U-Haul on bind, also known as lamps. It's really, really easy to get ulted by a Brim there and die. In fact, most times Brims will actually ult in the very start of the round, and I have died to them myself, and I feel like an idiot. All I had to do was check the top of my screen or the scoreboard. So hitting tab in these situations really big. It helps you realize, like, for example, Reyna, you want to know when she has an ult. Sage, you want to know when she has a res, because that way you know if you kill someone early to pay attention to if the Sage is going to be there to try to res, and maybe you can try to stop it. On a different note, but in a similar vein, right, the economy. Check to see how much money the enemy team has. Do they have at least 3,900? That way they can buy armor and assault rifles. If they don't have 3,900, do they have at least 3,300? 400 for the light armor, and then 2,900 for the rifle. It's really important you understand this, as well as ops. Do they have at least 4,500? Whenever the enemy team has at least 4,500, it means that someone on that team can buy an op. Whether they have armor or not is up to.
They're probably not going to buy an op with 4,500, unless they have full utility from the round before, which you would know. They're probably not buying an op with 4,500. It's a really bad play. Having no armor, going against like an eco round or something, you can get one tapped with a USP. Having no armor against specters, you're gonna get one tapped or 2 tapped. It's really not smart to buy an op with no armor.
If they want to give the gun to someone else, but it's good to know that sort of stuff before the round starts.
Unless you're on Ascent. I will say, unless you're on Ascent. If you're on Ascent, buy an op with no armor. That map is ridiculous.
So you can actually change up your play to match the information that you have. And then coming to number 7 is I adjusted my play constantly to sort of the style or the caliber of the enemy. So either how they were playing or how good they were. I played a lot of very, very good people, including pro players, including ex-CSGO pros, Overwatch players, things like that, who are very, very talented. And a lot of the times I would just lose 1v1 duels straight up at range. I just could not compete in some rounds against these guys. So what did I do? I stopped peeking them. You know what I mean? I stopped feeding.
This might just be a whole section on playing the game right. I mean, I don't know what this section serves a purpose, because he's just saying like play the game differently based on how the enemy team plays. That's kind of just like a default like way to play FPS games. Like you need to be adaptive. You need to learn how the enemy team is playing and how you can outplay them. I mean, that's kind of like self-explanatory to any 5v5 shooter. I mean, if you're not if you're just doing something because you think you want to do it every round, you're not going to get very far. You need to do stuff based on what the enemy's doing, based on the callouts you have, based on the information you have. You can't just do you. But I mean, yeah, if you're playing better players, I wouldn't just constantly swing them. That's probably true. I mean, I guess you did say that. That's probably true. If you're playing worse players, maybe you can just constantly swing them. But in general, I mean, being aware, being able to change your playstyle is something that you need in every single game, and that's just something you need to learn as a person.
Alright guys, and now I just wanted to quickly go over a few more things, just really quick, that I thought were super important and really helped me sort of get to Immortal with the least stress possible. First really was about not peeking oppers. I just stopped. I won so few duels against oppers, especially at range, especially on Ascent. Oh my gosh.
Ascent topping.
I just gave up on that. You know, I use my utility, I let my teammates flash them, things like that. Stop dry peeking them. Also on top of that,
that's something that's just true. I mean, I don't think it's ever been smart to just dry peek an opper. It's not Counter-Strike. You can't do that in this game. Unless you have an op and you have like 60 less ping than them, maybe you can. Or unless you're like quicker than speed of light. But I mean, for the most part, unless the opper is really bad and really slow, or they looked away from their monitor, they're not gonna miss if they're holding an angle, and you just dry peek them.
I constantly learned the maps. Just because I feel really confident doesn't mean I know every single thing about the map. I constantly learned new angles, different ways to play certain positions, you know, how I can sort of fall back and play a more passive mid on Ascent. That was huge to me in sort of developing and getting better. And then on top of that, you know, I constantly changed the way I was playing. Like I said.
So find new positions. I mean, yeah, that's again, this one seems pretty self-explanatory. I mean, maybe this is not supposed to be for like, I don't really know, but yeah, finding new positions. That's, you just have to learn how to play the maps.
I think it was number 7, right? Like I don't want things to be telegraphed to the enemy. So if I'm playing something and it's not working, I had no problems trying to change it up.
But he said play positions that you like. This one's contradicting, because I originally said that yes, you need to change how you're playing. And he originally said in this one that he would go back to U-Haul even if his team was trying to tell him not to go U-Haul. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, changing your playstyle is kind of the same thing as change up your play against better aimers. It's kind of the same thing. I'm thinking he just did this one to get it over 10 minutes. Or he was already over 10 minutes, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, you have to change up your playstyle.
So it's really, really important that you're constantly looking for ways to improve, and you're not sort of getting into that routine of where you run to the spot, dive, run to the spot, dive, run to the spot, dive.
If you ran into a spot and died more than once, you should not do that again. That's just true. So I think I don't have to watch the last 2 minutes. I mean, I've sort of gotten the gist of it. I mean, I've agreed with some of the things he said in here, but I mean, there's some things that are just questionable.